Hello, thank you for stopping by. My name is Becky and this is BecxReadz, and today I want to have a little discussion, share my thoughts on an Acotar joke that I've seen a lot that I personally just don't find funny, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. I'm going to be discussing Acotar as a whole series, so if you are somebody who doesn't want to be spoiled for anything, I may say some things that could be considered spoilers to you, so this might not be the video you want to watch. I'm also going to try and do this with this crown on my head in representation of Feyre. I tried to be as High Lady of the Night Court as I could get, but this thing is not attached to my head, so it may fall off at some point during this video. In case you're living under a rock and don't know what it's about, it is about a 19-year-old girl named Feyre who is the sole provider for her very poor family. She accidentally kills a fae, and in retaliation for her doing that, she is forced to go live in the Fae realm to try and break the High Lord of Spring's curse. This is essentially a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but the story progresses from there and it evolves into this epic fantasy romance that so many people absolutely love, including myself. Acotar as a series touches on a lot of hard-hitting themes and topics, such as poverty, rape, war, PTSD, trauma, grief, abuse, physical, mental, emotional, and I've never seen anybody make light of any of those themes or topics, but the one that I've seen a lot is Feyre's illiteracy. And I wanted to discuss with you why I don't think it's funny and why I think people feel comfortable making light of her illiteracy. So just in the past couple of days, as I've been scrolling trying to find the latest Crescent City spoilers, you can imagine that my Instagram feed has turned into nothing but Sarah J. Maas content. So I've been given a lot of reels and posts about Acotar as well. And just in the last couple of days, I've compiled screenshots from various posts and reels that make light of Feyre's illiteracy. I'm not going to share the actual reels or even the people who made them because I do realize that these people are just trying to be funny. They're just making a joke. They think it's hilarious. I don't though, so here's what I've screenshotted. A mortal teenage girl who can't even write a complete sentence. This was in reference to, I believe the beginning part was Amarantha thinking she was going to win. This one was a reel where it had a Friends clip from it where all the friends are asking Phoebe if she knows how to ride a bike, and Phoebe is insisting that she does, and they're like, "Can you show us?" And she's like, "Sure." And this screenshot was the end of that reel. Fails illiterately, which isn't even spelled right. Rhysand watching an illiterate teenager cover herself in filth to fight a worm. Here's a couple that involve Tamlin and Feyre being illiterate. So I want to give these posts and these videos the benefit of the doubt. I want to consider that they are highlighting Feyre's illiteracy as in saying, look, she's illiterate, but she still got the 500-year-old fae to fall in love with her. She's illiterate, but she beat the bad guy. I want to give them that benefit of the doubt, but that's me being generous because they're really not. They're making fun of her illiteracy and the fact that she cannot read. It's making fun of somebody's shortcomings or insecurities as a way to say, well, they did it, so you should be able to do it too. That's essentially what all these posts are doing. And I am somebody who is capable of taking a joke. I know these are all in jest. I've laughed at some pretty dark and politically incorrect humor, let me tell you. But these just don't come across as funny to me, and I think it's because I can relate to Feyre. And while I'm not illiterate, I've never been illiterate, so I can't say what illiterate people are feeling. I do have a disability. I have an impairment. And I know that when people constantly highlight that about me and make fun of that and joke about it, it's not fun. It's not fun. I've had to deal with it my entire life. So when I see these things where people highlight Feyre's illiteracy and make light of it, I think it's because I put myself in Feyre's shoes. You're making light of somebody's insecurity, something that they had no control over, you know? And her illiteracy in these comments really has nothing to do with the context of what they're saying. Her being illiterate had nothing to do with Rhysand falling in love with her. Her being illiterate had nothing to do with her beating Amarantha. In fact, her being illiterate is the thing that almost prevented her from beating Amarantha. Her being illiterate had nothing to do with her risking her life to fight for Tamlin. So I hate it when people put in a descriptor that doesn't need to be there. Rhysand would have still fallen in love with Feyre even if she was literate. Feyre still would have risked her life for Tamlin even if she was literate. She would have been more successful at defeating Amarantha if she were literate. So when I say I try to give these posts the benefit of the doubt that they're trying to be positive, that's why I know they're not. Because they are taking a character's flaw, insecurity, and they're making light of it. But I've sat back and I've thought about why it is that readers feel comfortable making light of Feyre's illiteracy when they don't feel comfortable making light of the fact that Rhysand was raped for 50 years, or Mor's abuse, or Nesta's grief and PTSD. I don't see anybody making light of those situations, so I'm like, why is it that people feel comfortable making light of someone who can't read? And I think it's because we as readers aren't used to seeing characters who can't read. In fact, I know personally, I can only think of 2 books that I've read in my entire reading lifetime that had characters central to the plot who weren't able to read, this being one of them. And we're so used to seeing the characters who love to read in stories because these authors obviously love to read, and so they put that into their characters. I mean, hell, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and what was a main character attribute of Belle? She loved to read. Even Nesta in A Court of Silver Flames, what is something she loves to do? She loves to read. Even Aelin in the Throne of Glass series, what is something she loves to do? She loves to read. So seeing a character who can't read, maybe we see that as something that's just fantastical, that is an anomaly that we can poke fun of because it's not as well known. And we as readers obviously are literate, so I think it's just not the norm for people to understand that there are people who just can't read. And I've heard people in video reviews question how it's possible that a 19-year-old girl who was born into a wealthy family, her 2 older sisters knew how to read, how is it possible that she never learned how to read? And I want to give you this idea to keep in mind. Feyre essentially lives in a historical setting. She doesn't live in modern times. This isn't urban Crescent City. She's living in what amounts to a historic setting. Her family became poor, I believe, when she was like 8 or 9. Her mother didn't seem like she was the most interested in teaching her daughters anything more than how to find a rich husband. And she had to become the sole provider for her family when she was a young teenager. So if you think of all that, is it really that unrealistic to believe that she never would have learned to read? She does mention that she knows her basic ABCs, but just knowing your ABCs isn't enough to know how to read. You have to know the sounds and how that goes together. So I wanted to do some research into modern day illiteracy rates, just so you could have an idea of how common it is for people not to know how to read. And I found a couple. I'm going to link the sources down below just so you don't think I pulled these off of a Wikipedia page. The first statistic I found was, despite the rise of literacy rates over the past 50 years, there are still 773 million illiterate adults around the world, most of whom are women. 130 million Americans, 54% of adults between the ages of 16 and 74 years old, lack proficiency in literacy, reading below the 6th grade level. 54% of people 16 to 74 are reading at or below a 6th grade level. So again, if you imagine that's modern day, those people must have had much more schooling than Feyre, who is 19, so she fits into that category. Her family became poor when she was 8 or 9. And she had to become the sole provider for her family at the age of like 13 or 14. I was 13 in 7th grade. So if you can imagine an adult is only reading at a 6th grade level, imagine what a supposed 7th grader would be reading at. If their family is poor, they're going to be reading at a much lower level. So it's not unrealistic to think that Feyre wouldn't know how to read. Now, don't get me started on how she learned to read, because if you can't read basic sentences, Rhysand writing out, Rhysand is the most handsome High Lord, Rhysand is the most blank, blank, blank High Lord, you're not really going to learn how to read by doing that. You can't just go from reading The Cat Can Jump to Rhysand is the most handsome High Lord. There's got to be some learning in between there. And I only know this because my sister teaches literacy. And so I've been around her enough to understand the process of how you teach people how to read. But, you know, don't get me started on that. That is not the purpose of this video. I am not knowledgeable enough in how to teach people how to read. That would be something my sister would be knowledgeable at, because she literally teaches teachers how to teach kids to read. But I just wanted to share my thoughts on why I don't think it's funny for people to make light of Feyre's illiteracy, because it's not something she could control. And look at everything she did despite the fact that she couldn't read. She provided for her family, she risked her life for Tamlin, she saved them, she fell in love, she became High Lady of the Night Court, all that jazz, despite the fact that the girl was illiterate. So that was my thoughts on this topic that I needed to get off my chest. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts. Do you think I'm being too sensitive about this? Do you find making fun of somebody's illiteracy funny? Are you aware of how prominent illiteracy still is in our modern world? Let me know your thoughts below. But if you don't want to comment that, but would like to let me know that you made it to the end of this video, could you leave me a book emoji? And maybe a congratulations, because this crown hasn't fallen off my head this entire time. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and until my next video, be thankful you can read. Bye.